In one of my last videos, I covered the traits which made up the basic types of Pokemon. I looked at what these types were typically very good at, and what they typically struggled with, to try and make up some archetypes of how they should be played. It's something that I think Pokemon should lean into a lot more, as it would make every type feel a bit more fleshed out. In this video, I wanted to continue that with the elemental types. The types like Steel, Ice, and Electric, and I'll probably follow this up with a few more conceptual types like Fighting, Psychic, or Bug. Before I get into actually talking about the types, I wanted to bring up that I've actually started another channel where I talk about movies and comic books, another passion of mine, and I've just made a video about how I would have rewritten the Super Mario movie, or how I would have written it if I was in charge of it. It won't appeal to everybody, but if you're interested, the link's in the description, and I would really appreciate it if you checked it out. I would say the thing that defines the electric type the most is that the Pokemon are fast. Most electric types are built for speed, which naturally means that they're much more offensively focused. Speed is the most important stat in Pokemon, as it's the most binary stat. You're either better than your opponent with it, or worse. Speed is such a defining stat to have in Pokemon, and the fact that many electric Pokemon are incredibly quick means that they're going to be very good at attacking. Another thing that makes electric a good type is that it hits some types which are very good themselves. I spoke about it in the last video, but water is an incredibly good type with very few drawbacks. Flying is also a great type to have, and a lot of Pokemon have a secondary typing of flying. Being able to hit these two types is what makes electric an amazing coverage type. Electric also is resisted by some types that it doesn't really care about. Grass types are typically not the most threatening Pokemon in the world, and both Dragon and Electric types tend to be pretty frail attacking Pokemon. Electric's really good offensive profile is part of the reason why Bolt Beam is so good. These two types are incredibly good for hitting neutral damage. By far, Electric's number one downside is that they struggle so much to deal with ground types. Ground types are typically pretty bulky, which means that hitting them with neutral hits probably won't be enough to break through them. But the issue is that electric types get very little coverage. A lot of electric types are extremely one-note attackers, and they rely on you getting rid of the opponent's ground types with other Pokemon in order to allow them to be at their full potential. Most electric types cannot touch a ground type. On the topic of bad move pools, electrics also really struggle for good physical moves. It's a bit of a running joke in Pokemon that Game Freak does not want to give electric any good or even usable electric physical moves. If you don't have a signature physical electric move, you're stuck with either Thunderfang, Thunder Punch, or Wild Charge, which is an absolute slap in the face to physical electric types. Wild Charge is awful. Why is it so weak? I know that there is only the Pikachu line exclusive Volt Tackle, which is essentially the Flare Blitz clone, but if you're gonna make a signature move, make it more powerful and just up the power of Wild Charge, because 90 base power and having recoil is ridiculously stupid. So many Pokemon would be so much better if this move was even just 10 base power points stronger, but I think 20 would be at least the minimum to make it 110. That's not even as good as Flare Blitz. Having covered Electric, I think we'll go on to its natural rival, the Ground type. Of course, one of the best traits of the Ground type is just the absolute neuron activation move of Earthquake. Earthquake is probably my favorite move in the whole of Pokemon, so I've mentioned it so many times, but it's just one of the most consistent moves in all of Pokemon. Even from the moment you begin to play Pokemon as a kid, you realize that one of the best strategies is just Earthquake everything. Very few moves offer you such a good trade-off between power and accuracy, because there just isn't a trade-off between them. The only issue that you're going to have with Earthquake is that there are quite a few Pokemon who are immune to it. But obviously Ground makes up for this in the fact that it hits a lot of types for super effective, and there are a lot of very good types. Hitting Steel for super effective is an incredibly good trait to have, and as I mentioned in the last video, Fire is actually a pretty good defensive type, so hitting that for super effective is also incredibly good. As a counterpoint to what I said earlier, you also have the fact that ground types pretty much dominate 90% of all electric types in the game, meaning that they play a really important role on your team, and meaning that you're probably going to have a ground type on every team just because they are the one type that deals with electric. Ground types are also some of the most well-rounded Pokemon from a stat perspective in the game. There are a lot of ground types who are just incredibly consistent and versatile and offer both bulk and attacking power. Many also get access to Stealth Rocks, which are incredibly important in a singles metagame, and as I'm going to go into later, they're probably some of the best users of the move Stealth Rock. The main weakness I would say with the ground type is that they have some pretty common weaknesses. Water types are going to be on every single team, and a lot of Pokemon run ice type coverage. This means that they might have to have a little bit more support than is typical. You also have the issue that a lot of Pokemon are immune to them. I worked out that about 15% of all Pokemon are immune to ground type moves. There's also the fact that there is an item that will just make you immune to ground type moves, which means that maybe your strategy of just clicking Earthquake won't be as good as you think it will be. Rock to me has always been the sister type to the ground type, and it's a real shame because Rock is a awful type. Its saving grace is that it's a pretty good attacking type, hitting some good types for super effective damage. They also get quite a bit out of Sandstorm due to the fact that most of them have pretty bad special defenses to start with, so they really appreciate that boost that they get from the weather. Other than that though, it's not very good for Rock. Rock has a bit of an identity crisis, in the fact that I think it's stuck between a rock and a hard place between the ground and the steel types. It's not as good offensively as the ground type, but it's not as good defensively as the steel type. It's probably not even as good defensively as the ground type, which is a more offensive type. But this clashes with how the Pokemon are actually made. Many rock types are meant to be strong physical walls, but they're weak to probably the two most common physical attacks in the game, barring knockoff, Earthquake, and close combat. This means that they can't really fulfill this role that they were meant to. There's also the fact that for some reason Game Freak insists on creating rock moves that cannot hit. I mentioned it in the video on how I would fix rock types, but the strongest rock type physical move, which is 100% accurate, is the 50 base power Smackdown, which is 10 base power stronger than Tackle. I don't know why it is that Game Freak has decided to make this decision, but it's just so weird because Rock isn't a very good type. Like, they didn't give it to a good type to nerf it, they just made a bad type worse. This may also sound weird, but I think that Rock suffers from its own success, in that it's defined by a singular move. Stealth Rock is phenomenal in singles metagame, and this means that any Pokemon who is weak to Rock is pretty much already bad. So therefore, you don't really need a Rock type or a Rock attacker on your team, because you're not going to face many Rock weak Pokemon. Rocks are also so well distributed that you don't even need to have the Rock type on your team to use the best thing about the Rock type. There are so many better Pokemon that get access to Stealth Rocks that why would you even need to use a Rock type in order just to get them set up? It's not like you get anything more out of them being a rock type using them. You don't get stab on Stealth Rocks. Game Freak just seems to have something against the rock type. Moving on from a type that has nothing going for it to a type that has pretty much everything going for it, Steel is unmatched defensively and is probably one of the best types in the game. It is the king of defensiveness, resisting half of all the other types in the game. A bad Pokemon can be changed completely by the fact that they are a steel type, because it just is such a good defensive profile that it defines how a Pokemon works. Pokemon also knows how to design a steel type, as they're incredibly good at what they do. Many steel types do exactly what they say on the tin, and they are incredibly strong defensive Pokemon. They're also one of two counters to what you voted as the best type in the game, Fairy type, which is another reason why they're so incredibly good. Fairy is one of the best types in the game, and Steel is the most viable way to get rid of them. If I had to think of a downside to the Steel type, I'd probably say that they have some pretty lackluster attacking options, but to me that really doesn't matter because Steel is much more about its defensive ability rather than its attacking ability. You might also point out the fact that they do have some pretty common weaknesses. Similar to Rock, they are weak to both close combat and Earthquake, but they also have that fire weakness as well. But unlike Rock, this is countered out by pretty much everyone else they resist. So if you've learned anything from this video, it's just that steel is rock but better, and also ground is rock but better. If steel was a type that was designed for defensive utility, ice is a type designed to be offensive. Just look at which ice types are the good ice types. It's the ones who are fast, strong, attacking glass cannons. Whilst the ice type is resisted by a lot of types, it's such a good, strong, offensive type that has a really consistent move in Ice Beam and even in Blizzard, which is a great move as well. Similar to Rock, Ice suffers from its success in that its moves are much better than the type itself. This means that Pokemon that don't have this type take much greater advantage of it, as they have all of the strengths of the type, but without the weaknesses of actually having that type. Ice Beam is an incredibly good coverage option, and most Pokemon that can run Ice Beam will always run Ice Beam. The reason why it's so much better as a coverage type is because the Ice type defensively is awful. It's the worst defensive type in the entire game. It offers absolutely nothing in the way of utility, because if you're switching into an ice type move, you're probably going to have a water or a steel type on your team that can do that job as well. It's also weak to a lot of really common attacking types, and most importantly stealth rocks, so you're either limited on your item choice or having to play around when you get onto the field. What doesn't help is that many ice-type Pokemon are designed to be slow and bulky, which goes completely against how the type is designed. So many ice-type Pokemon are bad because of this. They're basically designed to fill a role that their type cannot facilitate. The good ice types are the ones who are glass cannons, and this is because they actually work with how the type works. It's a death sentence to be a slow, bulky ice type, because the ice type itself does nothing for that. The final type that I want to talk about in this video is the poison type, which is really the opposite of the ice type, in that it's a type that is meant to be defensive. But unlike ice, Game Freak does tend to match this with the types of Pokemon that they create. Many poison types are slower, bulkier, and have access to things like healing, which make them incredibly good defensive Pokemon. The type has a really good set of resistances, resisting both fighting and fairy, and the all-important U-turn. Poison types even specialize in passive damage, which means that these much more defensive Pokemon can become much more useful. By spreading poison through things like Toxic or Toxic Spikes, they're able to deal passive damage that can kind of make up for their lackluster ability to attack. Like Steel, Poison is also one of the few ways that you can hit the best type in the game, the Fairy type. Even though Steel does outclass it due to the fact that everything else about the Steel type is brilliant, just being able to hit fairies for super effective damage makes poisons pretty good. I touched on it before, but one of the main drawbacks with the poison type is that they are not a very good attacking type. Hitting grass for super effective damage isn't uncommon, and the only thing that they have going for them other than that is hitting fairy. A lot of other types resist the poison type, which just means that if you're using them, you're probably not going to use them for their attacking ability. Because the poison type lacks offensive power, it means that the Pokemon can be quite passive, and if you can find a way to play around them, maybe this is through taunt or out healing them, they really become a lot less effective. Were there any of the traits that you thought that I missed during this video? If you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate it if you left a like or commented or even subscribed. Thank you.